the rabbi did an awful lot of what I was going to say. And he said it probably more eloquently than I could, so I appreciate that. So we'll wing it from this moment on and tell you that speaking in front of this congregation, my congregation, in this synagogue, with my family sitting in front of me, and undoubtedly the spirit of my mother filling this sanctuary, I could not find a more meaningful and important and special place to be. And I would have to say that I've spoken several times already about the book, and God willing, I will speak hundreds of times more. And I don't think any of them will ever mean as much as standing here on this bema and addressing this beautiful congregation who is gathered tonight. So I thank you for being here. And it's not going to be a heavy conversation, because as I was talking to my sister earlier at dinner, and I said, we've managed to find some joy in the Holocaust, and that certainly has to be a mind-boggling concept. But the truth is that the joy that's here are in the faces of the survivors. It's written all over Joan Ferencz's face. All you have to do is look at her and see her smile, and you know that there's joy that came out of this tragic and unimaginable period of time. And all you have to do is talk to Ellen Katz, and you're drawn in immediately. And you know that you're filled with her resolve and her strength and her spirit. And that's really a byproduct of what this remarkable community went through. Because probably like me, you have inconveniences every day of your life, and they throw you for a loop. But an inconvenience doesn't compare to when Ellen's sister was just a little too old to make the kinder transport and never made it out of Germany. And that puts into perspective what's really being inconvenienced in life. So I bring you along on this journey that is Recipes Remembered. And David, thank you for saying journey, because when I first brought up the subject to him about 3 years ago, a little more than 3 years ago, and I described what I wanted to do, and I explained to him that our family had just sold our family business, and my wise sister said, we've done well, it's time to do good. And we've all written checks to charities, and we've all volunteered, and we've all done some measure, I'd like to think, of goodness to help someone else. And in my newfound retirement and all my free time, I wanted to do something good that felt personal and felt meaningful. But because I'm not a saint, I also wanted to have fun. And what brings me great pleasure? I love to eat. I love to cook. I have been known on a Tuesday night at 9 o'clock to throw a duck in the oven and roast it, to make a lingonberry reduction sauce. And if I tell you that all that's left is the carcass, you will just have to believe me. I love to eat. I love to cook. I guess I had to learn to cook from my dad, because if you love to eat, somebody's going to have to cook the food for you. And the other thing I love to do, aside from talking apparently, is I love to write. You take a thought and you put it on paper, and all of a sudden it has a permanence. It's just not something that's floating about, but it's something that you can look at and refer to the next day and the next week and the next year. So how do you take the love of cooking and the love of writing with wanting to do good? Well, at that point in my life, in my family's life, we became very supportive of the Museum of Jewish Heritage. If you have never been, it sits poised at the edge of Lower Manhattan with a view of the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. And not only do those two iconic structures really frame the view from the window, but they frame the perspective of the museum. And that's one of looking back at the past and embracing it, but celebrating the future. Well, that resonated with us, and so we became supportive, and we became check writers. And now I had a project, and I had an idea to do more than write the check, but to write the book, to interview Holocaust survivors with their families, gather their stories, recreate their recipes, and hopefully present something that you need a personal trainer to lift, but something that looks like this. Something that we can be proud of. Something that we can turn to and that your children can turn to and their children can turn to. And we can honor the legacy of this amazing group of people who, their accents are fading. These stories are not going to be told in the first person forever. So it became our responsibility. And I felt it was my responsibility to tell these stories. So are they sad? Well, of course, you're telling a story about the Holocaust. But the goal was, and maybe the challenge, but what turned out to actually be the easiest part of the project, was to take the survivor and move them from their childhood, this amazingly happy time in their life, and weave a thread of food memory that takes them from those earliest childhood memories of baking challah with their mother or making lokshen noodles. That's how you judge the filibuster, according to Regina Finer. And taking those memories and bringing them through the time of the Holocaust and out the other end. Because this is a group of people who learned how to turn tragedy to triumph. And all of us, at least I know I do, and I'm sure all of you do, are able to conjure up a memory of food. Makes you feel good, makes you feel happy, takes you to a comforting, nourishing, nurturing place. That's what we did in the book. So when I spoke to Joan Ferencz and I told her, tell me about your childhood, she relayed stories to me about preparing for Passover and how she used to run up to the attic in her house to get the dishes. And this was really the highlight of her year. And her father, if I'm not mistaken, Joan, would sit in a white robe at the head of the table. And she wrote and told me that she was afraid when they opened the door for Elijah, he really could be standing there. And we've all experienced that. And Joan was glowing. And we moved from that moment into Auschwitz, where there was such sadness and such tragedy and such horror. But even in those moments in Auschwitz, Joan managed to find the faith, the love, the instinct, the resources to survive and to take a sister from one line, which somehow she knew in her gut was the wrong line to be on, and move her to her line, the line that survived. And when you hear things like that, you begin to wonder, was it lucky? Was it fate? Most of the survivors I spoke to told me it was luck, and I'm going to tell you something. I think they give themselves enough credit, because I don't think it's luck when you speak up on a bus and you say, why is this happening to me? And you make such a stir that the bus driver opens the bus and lets you off the bus, and you're only 8 years old. Is that luck, or is that taking your destiny in your own hands? The book is filled with stories of people who just grabbed circumstances like the Bielski partisans who took Polish peasants from the depths of the woods to the edge of freedom. 1,200 of them. They donned disguises and they carried weapons and they traveled rivers by night and streams by day, and they saw the light at the end of the war. 1,200 of them walked out of that forest because 3 of them took the lead. When Rabbi Greenberg charged me with writing this book, he called it a sacred venture. Remember that term? And I grappled with it. I said, what a daunting thing to say to somebody. I'm on a sacred venture. I thought I was writing a cookbook. But it was a venture, a journey. It was taking me from one place to another. But the component that I couldn't figure out was what was the sacred aspect that our rabbi was talking about. Was it the sacred faith that the survivors had? Was it the lessons that they've taught us that have made me feel stronger? And maybe that's a little bit of, I don't know, godliness? I don't even know if that's a word. But could they have imbued myself and anyone who reads the story with a little bit of godliness of saying, we can take things in our own hands and we can make a better life. That's what these survivors did. They told these stories through food, and they told these stories through faith. And they led me on a sacred venture. And I hope that when you read the stories and when you try the recipes, and you'll find they're all the best. You ever want to know what the best chicken soup is? Ask somebody what chicken soup their mother made. It's the best. I heard today about the best kasha varnishkas. I'm sure if you line all the best up, some of them are going to be better than others. But everyone told me it was the best. So it was my job to test every recipe, recreate it, write it professionally, and let you be the judge. Hopefully we've conveyed some of the best recipes. And at the end of the day, it's all Jewish food, because it's all prepared by Jewish people. But Joan made me a beef goulash, and Ellen made me a veal marengo. I don't know about you. I don't usually have that on my Passover table. But it's Jewish food because we've been thrown out of all the best countries in the world. And we cook a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And we cook from sugarine, a bissel of sugar, and an eggshell of matzo meal. And next thing you know, we have the best thing we've ever eaten. My mother's chicken soup with matzo balls that sunk to the bottom of the bowl and laid in my stomach till Passover was over. Best matzo balls I ever ate, because my mother made them. So it's your job, and I see people nodding in agreement. So it's your job to make the best. I will leave you with a story that, because there are so many to choose from, but we celebrated a 55th anniversary here today, and so many of the survivors speak with a clarity and a strength that it really defies their age. And you feel like you're there with them. You're drawn in with them. And one of those people was Lily Martin. And Lily took me on a sacred venture. She took me on a journey. And together, we crossed the Alps on New Year's Eve. And at the top of the Alps, as she was walking, mind you, walking from Hungary to Italy, she shared a cookie on the top of a mountain. Just a simple cookie. Months later, she was in Milan, and Lily and I went to the movies. This was back in 1940-something, so I wasn't really here, but I felt like I was in that movie theater. And I sat next to Lily as she spoke to a man in a row behind her, speaking Russian. And it was the same man she had shared a cookie with several months before on the top of the Alps. And very shortly after, I was standing under the wedding canopy as Lily exchanged her vows with Edward. And I know for sure that I shared in the embrace when Lily and Edward celebrated Israel becoming a state. She never made her aliyah to Israel. She never made the oath that she had hoped to in Italy. But she went to South America and made a life. And she had children, and she had great-grandchildren, and she made something of her life. So I say to you, learn from these stories. Make your own moments. Take a little bit of the fate in your own hands. Find what is sacred to you and incorporate it in your lives as best you can. And I turn to you and say, it's now your turn to tell these stories, because we are not going to hear these accents forever. And it is your obligation to continue the legacy and to honor these holidays.